Mahayakita, Bess. I sure miss you. This big old house is awful lonesome without you. I slept in late today. I didn't get up till about 8 o'clock this morning. I feel great. I've had my walk and everything. Get ready to take a shower here in a minute. Make me a little bit of breakfast. Anyway, I've got me a doctor now, and I've got an appointment tomorrow to go up there and fill out my papers so I can see a regular doctor. Anyway, here's a story about Silly Joe and Fancy Bess. Silly Joe lived way out in the Providence. His parents were farmers. When he got a little off time from helping his father on the farm, he liked to go to the creek bank to pick berries and especially to fish. And Silly Joe was real handy with making things, so he made him a fishing pole out of bamboo and baskets and hats out of palm leaves. He wanted to fish, but he noticed the fish on his side of the river was real small because the water was very shallow. But on the other side of the river, way across the other side, there were big fish jumping, and he wanted to catch a big fish. So he made a raft out of bamboo, and after he made this raft, he took his basket and all his tools and his bamboo fishing poles and went across and caught a big fish at the bottom of the river. And he decided to cook the fish, and he cooked the fish and ate it, and it was real good, but it was very big, and he had a lot left over because he couldn't eat the whole fish, so he packed it up in his homemade basket that he made out of palm leaves. And he decided to take a nap. Well, while he was sleeping, the water current was kind of strong, and the raft got untied and drifted away. It drifted away for miles and miles and miles. And he woke up, and it was the morning time. He had slept all night. But when he woke up, he was way, 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 way far away from home. The river had washed him way down, 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 down. And eventually the raft settled in some shallow water, but Silly Joe didn't know where he was. And so he pulled the raft to shore, and he looked high and low for his house, or trying to find out where his home was, but he couldn't see it. He was in a strange new place, way far, far away from home. So tigers and bears place. So he decided to climb way up high into a tree to see if he could see his home far away, but he couldn't see his home. Beautiful home way on top of a mountain. And it was getting late, and it started getting dark, so Silly Joe decided to build a little tree house on top of the tree so he could sleep that night. And when night came, he crawled up into the tree house, and he woke up. He looked high and low for his parents, so he started gathering things. But he kept thinking about that big house up on top of the hill that he could see far away. And on top of that hill was a castle, and inside the castle was a little girl his age, and she was very fancy. Silly Joe was kind of ragged. His mama made his clothes, and his hair was never combed, and he loved to play, and he had a very big imagination. Well, Silly Bess lived in the castle, but she didn't know Silly Joe, and Silly Joe didn't know her. But she saw something on top of the trees way on top of the hill. She was looking down, and she saw something move on top of the trees. And Silly Joe was watching the house to try to figure out what that big place was, because he'd never seen a big house like that. He wasn't even sure what it was. And Silly Joe was, and Fancy Bess was very curious too, because she could see something moving at the tree line. And Silly Bess had everything. She had all kind of toys, and she had a prissy little cat, very sophisticated cat. You know, the kind with the pug nose, like a Persian cat. That was her friend, but she didn't have any friends. Her mother made her dress up in nice dresses, and she couldn't play and run like she wanted to play. And she had no friends, but she had all kind of toys. And even in that big, fancy house, she was lonely, and she wanted a friend or some company, somebody to play with besides her doll and her prissy old cat. But she was very curious about what was at the end of the woods, and she asked her parents what was down there, and they said, you can't go down there, it's really scary. And there might have, it's scary to that place because it could be dangerous. There's lions and tigers and bears at the end of the woods. And you shouldn't go down there. But Fancy Beth was very curious, and especially curious about what that was on top of the trees that kept moving around. She wanted to go find out what it was. Well, at the same time, Silly Joe was curious about the big castle. So he wanted to climb way up on top of the hill to find that big home, to see what that big home was. At the same time, Silly Beth wanted to go down there, but she couldn't go because her parents wouldn't let her. So early in the morning, she decided to sneak out the window, and she crawled down the castle wall to go down the hill to explore the woods that her mother told her she couldn't go to, because she wanted to see for herself. She was very curious. And Silly Joe did the same thing. He was very curious, and he wanted to know what was on top of the castle, up on that big fancy house. And that's part one of how they started to find each other. They hadn't met yet, but they will. So help me figure out what they do and how they meet. I love you, honey, and this is your video that you requested.